Here's something a lot of people don't think about. Marking your work as you're working. You know, you got pencils, you got wax markers, you got crayons, depending on which side of the tracks you're from. We're going to talk about here is a product that I never really thought I'd be doing a video about, a marker, but we're talking about the Milwaukee Inkzall marker. And no, I'm not paid by Milwaukee, and I bought these, but I want to talk about these and how well they work in different types of shop projects coming up. Hi, I'm Roger, welcome to the shop, and what I want to talk about today are these Inkzall markers. Are made by Milwaukee, and I'm really impressed with them. They write on dust. Of course, you can always brush the dust off. They write on wet and oily surfaces, and this is where I'm really impressed by these things, because in the past, what do we use around the shop to mark? Well, you got pencils. Everybody has pencils, and the amazing thing with pencils is you can use it to mark your work, and you lay it down, and then you go back to get it, and can't find it. Where to go? Well, I have that problem too, so therefore, I have pencils all over the shop. I just have them sitting everywhere, and I don't have the fence on the table saw right now, but I usually have anywhere from 5 to 10 pencils sitting on my rip fence in different little places, or in my router dust collector to be able to mark things. So you get your basic pencil. That's good for fine lines. In fact, the mechanical pencils are even better if you need a very fine line and you're doing some fine work. So you get into things that are a little bit coarser. Let's say you're doing some framing or you're building a wall. There's the common Carpenter pencil here, these flat pencils. What's nice about these is you can lay them down and they don't roll. However, you can lay them down and then you still can't find them, but we all know how that goes. But these work. However, let's say you've got some treated wood right from the lumber yard. If you've ever bought treated wood, you know when you get it, it's wet. And you try to make a mark on that wet wood and it doesn't work so well. So, what's another option? China markers. Well, yeah, they are okay, but they don't really write on a wet surface either. The other problem is with these, if you leave them out in the sun on a hot day, you have a melted wax marker, so that's not going to do you a whole lot of good. There are what they call lumber crayons, or crayons, depending where you're from, and not to be confused with the ones you use in the coloring book. These are rather large, and they do an adequate job of marking on wet wood, but you cannot make a fine line with these. So what's next? Well, everybody hears of Sharpies. Yeah, Sharpie fine point. They don't really write on wet or oily surfaces either. In fact, they don't write on wet surfaces at all. So, and the other thing is, if you're writing on something and you need it to last a while and it's in the sun, this Sharpie marker will fade after a few weeks. So next you have the industrial Sharpie. So what's the difference here? Well, if it's out in the sun, it'll last a little longer, but it's still not a permanent solution. And of course, I wasn't really looking to do things about ultraviolet resistance, but this doesn't really write on wet wood either. And if you start trying to mark on wet wood with it, you're going to screw the point up on either one of these Sharpies, because the point will absorb the water, and then it kind of trying to mix with the ink inside, and then it doesn't work at all. So Milwaukee came up with these. It's called an Inkzall. Okay, we're all familiar with the Milwaukee Sawzall. It's become a generic term. All right, this is DeWalt. It's a DeWalt reciprocating saw. People still call it a Sawzall. It's kind of a generic name like Kleenex. You know, Kleenex is a brand name, but everybody says, you know, hey, I need a Kleenex, and it doesn't matter if it's made by Puffs or Charmin or whoever. So we're going to get into these markers here. They're called Inkzall. And I'm very, very impressed with these. We started using these in our greenhouses last year because I heard it had, of course, it writes on a wet surface, and that's a plus because a lot of times our tags of flats are wet. So it does very well with that, and I'm very, very impressed with how well it holds up under the sun. A plant tag usually lasts a plastic plant tag made out of styrene. Will usually last maybe 6 months max in the sun during the summer. And this will outlast the tag as far as marking on it. But it's also very, very good for marking on a wet surface. Let's say you want to do some layout on an aluminum sheet and that aluminum is oily. This will still mark on it. And it has a fairly fine point. I don't know, maybe you can see there. It's a fairly fine point. It makes a fairly fine line. Of course, it's not for very, very fine finishing and very fine furniture use. You know, if I'm laying out, you know, molding for a window or something, well, I'm not going to use this anyway because if that ink bleeds over, it'll show right through the stain or the finish. So we're not going to do that. But for rough construction, framing, treated lumber, metal that has oil on it, this works very, very well. And another plus that it has is it has a hard hat clip. So, and I haven't worn this for a long time because I'm retired. This is my old hard hat. And as you can see here, it clips right on there and you can just pop this right off, use it, and then you can put it back when you can find the cap. There we go. And it's also adjustable. You can have it up closer to the front on the bill of the cap, and you'll be able to grab that pen or to make your markings. And you don't need to go like searching through, maybe you don't have pockets. I've got my apron on here, so I have pockets. And of course these fit right in there. And here's a Sharpie and there's a pencil, and I took these other pencils out, but this is a real plus to have too if you're in the construction industry. And again, I'm not sponsored by Milwaukee. They didn't give these to me, I bought them. They're not expensive. 2-pack of these at, I can't remember where I got these now. Might have been at Lowe's, $1.97. Can't beat it. So that's my little hype on some marking utilities for your in and around your shop, around construction, or maybe if you're working construction. Handy item to have, works well. If you got anything out of this, appreciate getting a thumbs up. That always helps the channel. Of course, always looking for subscribers, and next to that subscribe button's a little bell. You ring that bell, you'll be notified when we post another video. I'm Roger in the shop, my markers and my crayons. Maybe I'll color something. Maybe I'll just go have a beer. See you in the next one.